Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the English Hustle podcast. I'm Alex, and as always, I'm joined by Maria. We're so glad you could join us today.
Absolutely. Whether you're a returning listener or tuning in for the first time, we're thrilled to have you here. Today's episode is all about building effective learning strategies. Something that's crucial not just for academic success, but also for personal growth.
That's right, Maria. Effective learning strategies are key to not just studying harder, but smarter. These strategies can really make a difference in how well we retain information, understand complex concepts, and apply what we've learned in real-life situations.
And it's not just about more time spent studying. It's about making the time you do spend more productive, more focused, and ultimately more rewarding.
So, here's what we'll be covering today. First, we'll dive into some common challenges people face when trying to develop effective learning strategies.
Then, we'll talk about different types of strategies that can be tailored to your personal learning style. Whether you're a visual learner, an auditory learner, or you learn best through hands-on experiences, we've got tips for you.
And of course, we'll wrap up with some practical tips that you can start applying right away to improve your learning process.
We're really excited about this topic, so make sure you stay tuned because we're going to share some insights that could really change the way you approach learning.
All right, Maria. Let's dive into some key vocabulary that's essential for understanding and applying effective learning strategies. We've got about 8 to 10 terms that we're going to break down.
Yes. These are words you might not hear every day, but they're incredibly important if you want to improve how you learn. Let's start with a big one: metacognition.
Metacognition is essentially thinking about thinking. It's the ability to evaluate and control your own learning process. For example, if you realize that reading a chapter multiple times isn't helping you retain information, and you decide to switch to summarizing it in your own words, that's metacognition in action.
Next, we have active learning. This is all about engaging with the material in a hands-on way, like discussing concepts with others, teaching the material to someone else, or applying the knowledge in a practical task. It's more effective than just passively reading or listening.
Another important term is spaced repetition. This strategy involves spreading out your study sessions over time instead of cramming. For instance, if you study a topic today, you review it again in 2 days, then a week later, and so on. It's proven to improve long-term retention.
Then we have multisensory learning, which involves using multiple senses, like sight, sound, and touch, to help reinforce what you're learning. For example, combining reading notes with listening to a podcast on the same topic can make the information stick better.
And don't forget self-assessment. This is about testing yourself to see what you know and what you need to review. It's not just about taking tests, but actively quizzing yourself while studying.
Now that we've introduced these terms, let's try something interactive. We'd love for you all to try using these words in sentences. For example, you could say, I'm practicing spaced repetition by reviewing my notes every few days.
Exactly. And if you're trying to implement active learning, you might say, I'm going to teach this concept to a friend to better understand it myself. go ahead and practice these terms in ways that make sense to you.
Feel free to repeat the words with us as well. Metacognition, active learning, spaced repetition, and so on. Repeating the words out loud can help reinforce your understanding and improve pronunciation.
And if you're struggling with any of these terms, don't worry. The more you practice, the more familiar they'll become. And we're here to help you along the way. So, Maria, let's really get into what makes learning effective. There's no one-size-fits-all strategy, right?
Absolutely, Alex. Everyone learns differently. Some people are visual learners, meaning they retain information better when it's presented in a visual format like charts, graphs, or videos. Others might be auditory learners, where they learn best by listening, like through podcasts or lectures. Then there are kinesthetic learners who need to do something physically, like taking notes or using hands-on activities to really grasp a concept.
I've found that understanding your learning style can be a game changer. For instance, in college, I was really struggling with my biology class until I realized that I was more of a visual learner. Once I started using diagrams and drawing out processes, it made everything click.
That's a great example. I had a similar experience when I was learning Spanish. Initially, I was just trying to memorize vocabulary lists, but it wasn't sticking. Then, I started using auditory methods, like listening to Spanish songs and repeating the lyrics. That's when my language skills really improved.
It's also important to break down specific strategies. For instance, goal setting is crucial. When you set clear, achievable goals for your learning, it gives you direction and motivation. Then there's active recall, which is all about testing yourself on the material rather than just rereading it. And concept mapping is another powerful tool. It helps you visually organize and connect different ideas.
Let me share a quick story that really highlights the importance of finding the right strategy. Back in high school, I was really struggling with chemistry. No matter how much I studied, the concepts just wouldn't stick. I was so frustrated. Then one day, my teacher introduced us to concept mapping. I started mapping out chemical reactions, breaking them down visually, and suddenly, it all made sense. That simple shift completely changed my approach, and I went from dreading chemistry to actually enjoying it.
That's such a powerful example, Maria. It shows that sometimes all it takes is finding the right strategy to turn things around.
Let's talk about how listeners can start implementing these strategies in their own lives. First off, technology can be a huge help. There are apps for spaced repetition like Anki that make it easy to review material over time.
Definitely. And creating a study schedule is another effective strategy. Consistency is key, so planning out your study sessions and sticking to them can make a big difference. Even just 20 to 30 minutes a day can lead to big improvements.
And these strategies aren't just for students. Whether you're learning a new skill for work, trying to pick up a new hobby, or even just keeping your mind sharp, these techniques can be adapted to any learning context.
Right. The important thing is to stay consistent. Even the best strategies won't work if you don't stick with them. So, find what works for you and make it a habit. Let's dive into a dialogue that incorporates some of the key vocabulary and concepts we discussed earlier. Maria, Why don't we role-play a scenario where one of us is struggling to retain information for an upcoming exam, and the other offers advice using effective learning strategies?
Sounds good. I'll play the student who's feeling overwhelmed, and you can be the helpful friend with all the right strategies. Alex, I've been studying for hours, but nothing seems to stick. I've read the same chapter 3 times, and I still can't remember the key points.
It sounds like you're focusing too much on passive reading. Have you tried using active recall? It's a strategy where you test yourself on the material instead of just rereading it.
Active recall? How does that work?
It's simple. After you read a section, close the book and try to write down everything you remember. Then go back and see what you missed. This way, you're actively engaging with the material.
That makes sense. I've also heard about spaced repetition. Do you think that would help?
Definitely. Spaced repetition is when you review the material at increasing intervals, which strengthens your memory over time. Combine that with active recall, and you'll see a big improvement. Let's break down what we just discussed. First, we introduced the concept of active recall, a powerful strategy that turns passive learning into active engagement. Notice how I explained the technique in simple terms and gave Maria an easy way to apply it.
Exactly, and then I brought up spaced repetition, another key term from our vocabulary list. Alex connected it back to the earlier point about active recall, showing how these strategies can work together. This dialogue is a great way to see these learning strategies in action.
When you're communicating about learning strategies, it's important to use clear, relatable examples. This helps make abstract concepts more tangible and easier to apply.
Now we encourage you to practice this dialogue with us. You can repeat our lines or even create your own scenario where you're helping someone else with their learning challenges.
Let's try it together. I'll start, and you can follow along or pause the episode to practice on your own. Remember, the goal is to get comfortable using these strategies in everyday conversation.
We also recommend practicing the pronunciation of key terms like metacognition, active recall, and spaced repetition as you go. The more you use these words, the more natural they'll become in your vocabulary.
Now, let's dive into some really interesting facts about how our brains learn and retain information. Did you know that studies have shown that spaced repetition, where you review information at increasing intervals, can increase retention by up to 200% compared to cramming?
That's incredible. And here's another one. Research shows that multisensory learning, using multiple senses like sight, sound, and touch, can significantly improve memory and understanding. So if you're reading about something, try watching a video or even talking about it out loud to reinforce the learning.
Exactly. And get this. There's a study that found students who use active learning strategies like self-testing or teaching others tend to score higher on exams than those who just passively review their notes.
It's also fascinating that our brains are wired for pattern recognition. That's why concept mapping is so effective. It helps our brains see connections between ideas, which makes it easier to remember and apply information. We'd love to hear from you now. What are some of your favorite learning strategies? Or maybe you've faced challenges with learning. Tell us about those too. Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Let's see what's coming in. Here's one from Sarah. She says she's been using flashcards for spaced repetition, and it's really helping her in medical school. That's awesome, Sarah. Flashcards are a great tool for active recall and spaced repetition.
And here's a question from Tom. He asks how to stay motivated when learning something challenging. That's a great question, Tom. We'd suggest breaking down your learning into smaller, manageable goals and celebrating those small victories. Also, try to connect what you're learning to something you're passionate about. It can really boost your motivation.
Thanks for sharing, everyone. Keep those comments coming. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. Now that we've covered some powerful learning strategies, it's time to put them into action. We're going to guide you through a few activities that will help you apply what you've learned today.
First up, we want you to create a personalized study plan. Think about the upcoming week and identify the subjects or topics you need to focus on. Use what we discussed earlier. Maybe incorporate spaced repetition or active recall into your plan.
Take a moment to jot down your plan. You can pause the episode here if you need more time. Remember, the goal is to make a plan that suits your personal learning style.
Great. Now let's move on to identifying your learning style. Are you more of a visual learner, or do you retain information better through auditory methods? Maybe you're kinesthetic and need to be hands-on. Take a few minutes to think about which methods work best for you and write them down.
Again, feel free to pause if you need to. Understanding your learning style is crucial for choosing the right strategies.
Lastly, let's practice a new learning technique together. How about trying out concept mapping? Choose a topic you're currently studying and start by writing the main idea in the center of a page. Then, branch out with related subtopics, drawing connections between them.
As you create your concept map, notice how organizing information visually helps you see connections that might not be obvious otherwise. This technique can be especially useful when preparing for exams or complex projects.
Once again, take your time with this. You can pause here to finish your concept map. And remember, the more you practice these strategies, the more natural they'll become.
Well done. We hope these activities help you start applying what you've learned about effective learning strategies. Remember, practice is key to mastering these techniques. As we wrap up today's episode, let's quickly recap the key points we've covered. We started by introducing some essential vocabulary related to learning strategies, terms like metacognition, spaced repetition, and self-assessment. We then dove into various learning strategies, including active learning and goal setting, and discussed how these can significantly impact your learning process.
That's right. We also shared a personal story to highlight the real-world benefits of tailoring learning strategies to fit your needs. And of course, we provided practical advice on how to implement these strategies in your daily life. Whether you're studying for exams, working on a project, or just looking to improve your knowledge retention.
Remember, the key takeaway is that effective learning strategies aren't one size fits all. It's about finding what works best for you and being consistent in your approach.
As we mentioned earlier, learning is a journey. It's about constantly evolving and finding new ways to engage with information. We hope today's episode has given you some valuable insights and tools to enhance your learning process.
Absolutely. We encourage you to start small, maybe by incorporating just one or two of the strategies we discussed, and gradually build from there. The more you practice, the more natural these techniques will become.
And don't forget, Learning is supposed to be enjoyable. Stay curious, stay motivated, and keep challenging yourself.
Before we go, we'd love for you to engage with us. If you found today's episode helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to the English Hustle podcast. Your support helps us continue to create content that benefits you.
And we're always eager to hear from you. Leave us a comment or question about the episode, or share your experiences with the learning strategies we discussed. We'll be reading your feedback and might even feature some of your comments in future episodes.
Finally, take what you've learned today and put it into practice. Whether you're setting up a new study routine or trying out a concept map, we'd love to hear how these strategies work for you. Until next time, keep hustling and keep learning.